Like if Andrew Tate gets convicted, it's because of the Matrix. And if he doesn't get convicted, it's because the Matrix failed.
Literally, right? No matter what happens, you can find a way to make it fit. There's got to be like a fallacy there, yeah.
So I was talking to an old friend about this, and she actually suggested calling it an all roads lead to Rome fallacy.
I would fight against that. There was another really good one brought up by a Christian apologist whose paper I read. I should have saved these papers. And it pointed out an unbelievably glaring flaw in the violinist argument that I'd never thought of before. And it actually 180'd my whole opinion. I already thought it was kind of better, but it completely 180'd. So yeah, I don't have any good answers because people sometimes come on and try to ask questions about this. I don't have any good answers when it comes to resolving disputes between two entirely different systems. Happy birthday, LonerBox. Happy birthday. What are you, like 22 today?
I'm 32.
Yeah, okay. Sure thing, buddy.
Just my good looks, I know. Thanks.
Yeah, what's up? How's it going?
Oh, you know, I've taken a bit of a step back from streaming, which is good. Like it's very mental health positive and shit. But me, like now that every time I've got like streamer thoughts, I just can't say them to anyone, or I have to like call friends who don't care and shit.
Oh, yeah.
So I just thought I'd come here and drop them instead.
Oh, sounds based. Wait, before you do that, can I grab a Red Bull real quick? I'm not gonna be.
Yeah.
Let me prepare my brain. Hold on one sec.
Hey, Destiny fans. Shit. Someone say something stupid so I can have something to say in response. Otherwise, I'm gonna get a bit socially awkward, you know?
Okay.
Hey.
This is a song clip I watched. It's just so funny. Sorry, okay.
What, the one about raping billionaires and shit?
As long as other billionaires are going to be doing the raping, they might as well be raping other billionaires. Yeah.
The thing that really, I don't know how to get around this because it just seems like there's such a huge contingent of like online like revolutionary leftists who just like, there's this really gross stereotype that sometimes like Israelis will say about Palestinians, where they'll say like, oh, they care more about killing our kids than they care about defending their own, right? It's like a really, like a pretty like just nasty racial stereotype. But I feel like a lot of Western leftists just kind of embrace that. Like they do seem to just care more about hurting people they don't like than helping people they do supposedly advocate for.
Yeah, that's what I feel that way whenever somebody asks me about taxes. I always say, like, I hate taxes and taxes suck. Taxes are a necessary evil to fund what is good, which is our social programs. And that should be like the start and stop when we talk about taxation. We need to tax people so that we can fund the social programs we need to run an ethical society. But so many people on the left view taxes as like a fucking moral imperative, or at worst, like a punishment. Like, he doesn't pay enough tax, we need to pull taxes, fuck more, 91% marginal taxes. It's like the way, and I know they'll refute. They'll say, well, no, I don't mean that, but they do. They really, like, there should be no billionaires, it's evil, blah, blah, blah. It's like, listen, if we have the social programs we need and somebody kicks in enough and they help, you know, society and shit, if they're a billionaire, fuck it, who cares? But like, yeah, people view so much of it as like, they're more concerned with hating and shitting on some people than actually helping others. It's very, very, very fucking annoying.
Yeah, that Titanic thing was very, I'm really happy I wasn't streaming during that.
It's actually wild. And it's like, it's human psychology, like, laid most bare. You know, when a black guy gets killed and people are like, well, you know, he shouldn't have been in the first place. Well, he had a prior conviction 10 years ago for violent, blah, 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 you know, and it's like, okay, that's obviously kind of demented to think. But then it's like, well, they're billionaires, okay? They paid $300,000 to go on the sub. Like, you know, are these guys even worth it? And it's like, damn, bro, like, really?
It wasn't even that. It was like, because one of the guys was like the son of a billionaire who didn't even want to go, right? Like, he was 19.
Yeah, I know. And then like it's just wild. It's not that wild. It's basic human psychology, but like it is kind of wild, yeah.
What do you think should be? Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna ask what your streamer thoughts were, but yeah, go for it. What were you saying?
I was gonna say, you were spending a little while thinking about, there was like a fallacy that people do that you couldn't find a word for. It's when people have a worldview that like every bit of empirical data supports it. So what's a fucking example? Like if like if Andrew Tate gets convicted, it's because of the Matrix. And if he doesn't get convicted, it's because the Matrix failed.
Literally,
right?
No matter what happens, you can find a way to make it fit. There's got to be like a fallacy there, yeah.
So I was talking to an old friend about this, and she actually suggested calling it an all roads lead to Rome fallacy.
Cute.
I
I
quite
feel like
liked it.
there's got to be
All
like
roads.
a formal name for this though. There's got to be, because it's such an incredibly
someone
common
tried
thought
to tell
process.
me it's like a bit similar to circular logic, but I couldn't figure out how that works. But
No, it's not circular.
no,
What an idiot. Who said that?
the same person who came up with all roads. Okay, they're a mixed bag. I'll just say
Jesus.
that.
Well, now she gets dinged down for that.
That's the spitballing. You know, that's what you have to do. What the fuck else? Oh yeah, I heard you were making a self-defense research document a while ago.
No, I wanted to like, usually when I'm trying to think moral philosophy, usually what I'll do is I'll open a notepad and I just start writing a ton of things. I don't know if I have the mental fortitude to do this on stream though, because like even just like reading, I read a paper by, I think it was another Judith Thompson paper on self-defense or whatever, just even doing that little bit on stream is very, very, very hard because half the chat's not engaged because they don't give a fuck because it's boring material. And then a lot of people are asking retarded questions, making retarded objections when we haven't even like finished our point. It's just very, very, very frustrating. So I don't know if I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I'll probably do it. It'll be usually when I do things like that, I just usually write it up in a notepad on my own time. I'll grab a laptop, go to balcony and just start like writing shit.
Yeah, I think you were reading something at one point when I tuned in, but then I dipped out because it looked boring. Fuck. I was gonna ask because I think you're like pretty hardline on self-defense, right? Like if someone's stealing from you and you hold a gun to them and you say stop stealing, and if they carry on, you can just kill them, right? Because it's like they made the first move and they're making the choice to, like that kind of thing. Like it's okay to defend yourself with disproportionate force because they're the ones aggressing, right? The gist?
Yeah, but it seems as though intuitively there are some modifications that we want to make to that it can't just be a blanket kill somebody for trying to steal from, right? So like it seems to be the case that there probably needs to be some prior notice, right? Like for instance, if somebody wants to cross, like we used to cut through yards all the time as a kid, right? Like would it really be fair to murder a child crossing a yard even though it's private property? Well, if the kid really knew he was going to get killed, maybe there's an argument to be made there, but if you don't know, I mean, is it? So some prior notice seems to be the case. It seems like there might need to be a limit. I'm uncomfortable with this, but there might need to be a limit on the type of property stolen. Like if somebody truly was going to run up to you and steal $1, like, and you say, you put them on notice, you both have full wherewithal, full agency, whatever. Like, do you really get to kill them for the dollar? Even on that, I actually lean towards yes, because it's like, it's their choice. They're choosing to do it. They've got the agency. But yeah, I don't know. That's why I kind of want to write it down and formalize like where are the limits to this and whatnot. Yeah, and then when you go to the extremes on both sides, like what looks worse essentially. But yeah.
So you don't think like the dollar thing would just be an edge case? Like it would have to be consistent with the rest of it.
Well, everything has to be
with like defending. Yeah.
consistent, right?
Yeah, but I wonder if there might be some kind of like threshold somewhere where it is just worth letting something go in exchange for someone's life, right?
I get so the problem that I have with that is I love murder. The problem that I have with this is that I'm very uncomfortable compelling somebody to suffer at the hands of an aggressor ever in like any way, unless there's some like greater moral good or some greater agreement that's been made, like either explicitly or implicitly. So for instance, if you go to fight somebody in a boxing ring, explicitly you've agreed to some level of harm. If you play a sport with somebody, implicitly you've agreed that you could get harmed, you know, even if it's an accident. But like on a normal day-to-day basis, like the right to your body, the right to not have other people steal things from you, attack you, whatever, that's a very, very, very strong right to me. And I have a really hard time compelling people that could stop something, maybe only with lethal force, compelling them to suffer that injury by another person. That's really hard for me. Yeah.
Okay, this is going to go on a tangent because you mentioned the right to your body. Why? I know why I don't like the my body, my choice argument for abortion, but I think it might be different from yours. Why do you not like it?
So something that I thought was really interesting. I read 4 or 5 papers on, because I was going to debate Matt Dillahunty, who's actually a real human being and can actually argue and isn't some fucking weird demagogue piece of shit.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. So I actually took some days and I actually read Judith Thompson's full paper. I read a couple by a couple Christian apologists, I think, and then there was one I read by, I think it was a psych student. I don't know if I'll be able to find this guy's paper, but he made a really interesting argument. I think he called it in his paper. He called it de facto guardianship. And he made a de facto guardianship argument for abortion. and I stole a lot of the examples he used in that paper for why bodily autonomy is not enough. So here is an example that he gave. I believe this is one of the examples he gave. Let's say that a woman wakes up and she's locked in a cabin. Woman wakes up, she's locked in a cabin, it's completely snowed in, and there's a note that's left for her, and it says, hello, you and a 1-year-old baby, or you and a 1-month-old baby are going to be locked in this cabin for 3 weeks. I'll say 3 weeks. At the end of this 3 weeks, police are going to come, get you out. Everything's going to be okay. You've got enough food here. You've got water here. You've got a TV to watch. Your pay is being compensated. No external negative effects are going to befall you. And she's like, okay, sure. So she waits here for 3 weeks. The police come down, accompanied with the psychologists from or philosophers from the local university to monitor their experiment. They open the door, and the lady comes out unharmed. And everybody sees her, they're happy. And then they ask her, they say, hey, where's the baby? Is the baby in bed, or what's going on? And she's like, I left the baby to starve to death. In that sense, it feels like something has happened where the woman has become like a de facto guardian of the child. She's the only person there that can provide care for the child. She has the means and capability to do it, and doing so won't significantly harm or disadvantage her. So it feels like intuitively there's a moral obligation placed on that person to take care of that baby. I think if she came out of that room, if she came out of that house, and she had left the 3-week-old to die just because she was unwilling to feed it, I think most people would view that as a morally contemptuous behavior. And that kind of line of thinking of de facto guardianship, that if we were to concede that a fetus at conception is a baby, you've essentially been entrusted with the health and care of a baby, and through the course of ordinary development, you would give birth to that baby. You're the only one that can keep it alive. You're the only one that has the ability to do it. So you ought to maintain that, assuming that you're not going to be killed or anything in the birthing process. Essentially, yeah. Sorry. Whew. Okay.
So it's not really because usually when I hear bodily autonomy, it's more like, yeah, I guess I was never able to distinguish between the idea that no one has a right to use your body, right?
Correct.
Like, but it's always to do with like some kind of like physical attachment, right? Because obviously when a baby's born, they do kind of have a right to use your body in the sense that you have to do the things to keep it alive.
So I would fight against that. There was another really good one brought up by a Christian apologist whose paper I read. I should have saved these papers. And it pointed out an unbelievably glaring flaw in the violinist argument that I'd never thought of before. And it actually 180'd my whole opinion. I already thought it was kind of better, but it completely 180'd. So the problem, and God, it was such a simple thing. I can't believe it. I should have thought it was my own. For the violinist argument, imagine if instead of being hooked up to a violinist, and you've got to give them your blood and your kidneys and all that shit, right? Imagine if instead you were hooked up to the violinist for some number of weeks or months to keep them alive. Imagine if that was your child. Would you still have the right to disconnect? And in that sense, I actually feel like I had a way different intuition. Because if for whatever reason I woke up and my blood was being filtered through, or I was filtering my kid's blood through my body, and it's my son or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, nobody has a right to your body. If you want to disconnect, you can. I don't know. That's your child. Like, if you have any purpose in this world, is it not to provide for your children? And the violinist argument, if you swap the violinist out with a child, I think you can actually make a way more powerful compulsion for a person to, you kind of, if anybody has a right to anything, it would probably be a child too. Yeah. So, that's kind of where I'm at on those two things. Go for it. Yeah.
That's funny because I think that example you just mentioned was like I used it because I did a video on abortion like last year. Not that many people watched it, but I was like, it was kind of doing like a fake debate between like a liberal and a conservative on abortion, and that was the thing, is like swap the violinist out for like, instead of the violinist say that, well, first of all you have to have some responsibility, right? So let's say you're driving badly in a car and you smash into a child, and then they say you have to hook up like the violinist to them. Do you just like let them die, or do you have to go through like the 9 months of like inconvenience to save them?
Well, I think most people would say.
The problem I ran into with that was like, it is like probably some kind of like like maybe some moral imperative, but it's whether or not the state should be allowed to force you to make that decision.
Yeah, I think most people probably, even if it was through your own fault, for like a stranger, I don't think most people would say like, if you got in a car accident, now you have to like donate blood to them or something,
And that's the problem, I think. So I don't think that the bodily autonomy argument, like, I think it still gets you to a place where abortion up to viability is legal. But the thing I didn't like about it is that, like, if you don't get rid of the whole person who begins at conception thing, you're basically saying that, like, the state has to allow abortion, but it's, like, morally repugnant, right? Because you made the choice to have sex and have a baby and then just kill it afterwards.
Sure.
But are you in the same? Because I don't know where you are. Like, if it was just like bodily autonomy and it's a person at conception, do you think that abortion should still be illegal, or would it just be like legal but morally shit thing to do?
No, it should be 100% illegal, of course, punishable by like homicide or whatever. Yeah.
Oh.
Because if we're saying that a fetus is a baby, the same as a baby, then it gets all the same rights or whatever. And if it dies, and because you've had a fucking abortion, it's just like killing a baby, right?
And yeah, so not the idea that it's like. And it doesn't take away the fact that it's like basically like a parasite, like aggressing on your body, right? Because it's because of the choice that you made to put it there, or
I mean, even if you didn't make the choice, even in terms of rape, the thing, like here's the thing: if you want to kill somebody, that's a very, very, very high threshold for when we're saying you can kill people. Like we're allowed to murder people. Like even for death row inmates, they get like fucking 20 years of appeals and shit. You know. So if we say that the baby is like a human endowed with all the same rights and everything, it has to be protected in the same way, I would say.
Okay, so I think I know what you're going to say this, but just for the sake of bad faith debate, bro. So it's okay to kill someone over $1 if they're trying to rob you. Mm-hmm. It's not okay to kill someone for sapping your nutrients for 9 months and like all the other things that go with pregnancy.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference between these two subjects because one has agency and one doesn't. So, for instance, this is why I was saying that there needs to probably be, in certain cases, some understanding for enacting violent self-defense of property. Now, of persons, it might be a little bit different. For property, it might change. This gets a little complicated. If a child wandered into my backyard, I'm probably not going to execute that child in the same way that I might execute somebody who sees a sign, goes into the backyard, knows they're not supposed to be there, right? Because a child might not have the understanding to do it. I think in the case of a fetus, I think it's harder to compare them to another agent because the agent could choose otherwise. The fetus literally has no choice. They're looking at you as like the sole provider of nourishment. So it feels a lot more morally different, right? Like if a kid wanders into my backyard, or if a kid like wanders into my house and it's like the kid is like, I need to fucking feed, give me your breast. And as a woman, it's like that feels pretty weird. But like if it's literally like you're in a forest and the kid is like, I'm sorry, but like I have to drink your breast milk or else I'm gonna fucking die. Like that, I think it becomes it's a lot different because it's not like the fetus has no other choice, right? It can only feed, it can only use you as nourishment.
Yeah. So would you say that the even if it's like the kid in the woods, so I think the difference there is like in abortion, you're actually killing the thing. Whereas in the woods, you're kind of like saying no to someone that would depend on you for survival. So do you think the woods example would still be illegal then? Like it's illegal for the mother to just refuse breast milk to a kid that would die otherwise?
Illegal. Fuck, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about it a lot. I think that it's in certain cases, I mean, well, like child neglect, I think people have been prosecuted for murder, right? Second-degree murder, I think, for child neglect, for letting a child die.
For kids that they chose to have, or does that matter?
I know for sure it would be unethical to let a kid die. Would it be illegal? Yeah. I don't know if you could like legally compel somebody to take care of a child. I don't know if you could ever legally compel them. I'd say probably not.
So for you, it's like the reason abortion is like the problem with just if it's a person at conception is because it's actually the act of killing it rather than just leaving it to die. Is that what makes it different, or?
No, because in that case it's not, because like let's say you could perfectly remove a fetus and it's still guaranteed to die. I think at that like the doing versus allowing harm distinction there isn't that important to me. Like you're still essentially killing it, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there's no way to just leave it to die. Like, you have to do something to leave it to die. Whereas if you're in the woods and a 2-year-old comes out to you, you can just leave it to die. Like,
That's why I always point out in that Judith Thompson paper, she makes the same argument that when she argues in favor of abortion. She never makes the argument in favor of killing the fetus. And I think she even makes a distinction a couple times in the paper where she's like, just because you have the right to abort doesn't mean you have the right to kill a fetus. You just have the right to remove it from you. But that is a little bit different, yeah.
Well, that's why, like, I was when I saw that abortion debate with fucking Lance and Tim Pool and shit. Like, I noticed that after reading a bit about it, was like a lot of countries don't even call it abortion after viability. Like, I can't remember where it was, but I think it might have been the UK, where after 24 weeks there is no such thing as abortion. It's just termination for a fetal anomaly because, you would never have to quote unquote abort like in the same way beforehand. But yeah. I don't. Is that the same in the United States as well? Because I feel like the United States seems to have like higher. They seem to go later when it comes to abortion. Because
In the U.S.?
yeah, that's where. Because I always hear about like edge cases from the U.S. where someone went past viability but still aborted, like not evict, just like killed.
Well, in the U.S., I'm pretty sure in
Yeah.
states we have abortion all the way up to, in some places all the way up to birth, don't we? Basically, isn't there third trimester abortion available in states in the U.S.? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. If going from memory, but I think there were 4 places in the country that do it.
Damn.
And I think I almost asked you this last time, but my fucking internet died. But I was going to ask you about, like, when you look at some of those edge cases, some of them are like, some women had like a chronic condition where the treatment basically simulated a lot of the effects of pregnancy. So she didn't actually know she was pregnant until like 20 odd weeks, and then couldn't get the abortion until like 30 or something. But I think in Europe, I don't even know if that's allowed, because in Europe that would just be because our limits are only like 12 or 14, 16, 20 weeks. But what do you have thoughts on cases like that? Like if she doesn't know she's pregnant until viability, but then
It's
never
none of
wanted to
that.
have a
None
kid?
of that. None of that should matter. This is why,
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna say the fetus is a living person, then there's almost no exception you can make to kill. That's why people are like, oh, what about in case of rape? Okay, and like, who
Oh well,
cares?
this
Yeah.
is assuming that they're like they were going by consciousness, right? So like it could have been aborted before 24.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using other
that's
standards of abortion, that's fine. I think viability is a dog shit argument for abortion too. Like whether or not I get a right to life just basically depends on if there's like stuff to keep me alive at a particular point. I think that's dumb. But
Yeah, I think like the thing with consciousness, it just seems like it's definitely like a lot more saleable as well. Like it just seems easier. There was that debate you had with the 2 fucking ladies. There's the rhetorical thing that one of them kept doing was the whole thing about like it's science that your life begins at conception with the unique genetic code, right?
yeah.
I don't think you brought it up to them, but like I feel like a really good response to that is just that like would just be to ask like if that's the case, like why does life end before your genetic code does? Because like we have genes that actually come to life after you die, right? Like for at least a couple of days, there are genes that become more active after you die. I think it's like some that are to do with repairing brain tissue and other like cell activity and whatever.
I didn't know that.
Have you ever?
But
Yeah,
that's just frustrating because like it's such a stupid topic at that point. Like science can like help you, like can inform like decision making, but it can't ever tell you what's like right or wrong. That's not the goal of science ever. It's not even capable of doing that. So it's really frustrating. Someone's like, oh, my answer is science based. Like when somebody says that, they're like so far behind on the philosophical conversation that you're right. I need to think of like better. I need to think of better, quick, snappy analogies to illustrate why that's like such a fundamentally flawed way of thinking. Because it's just very frustrating when somebody says that. I already know that the conversation is going to be real dumb.
Yeah, I mean that because like at least from experience, like that's the one that I always feel like I don't think I've ever heard anyone get around. Is if you're saying life begins with the genetic code, it's like, well, why do we pronounce people dead when those genes are still going?
Yeah, and the answer is
'Cause
obviously
they go for quite a
different,
while, yeah.
And then they
Yeah,
start
and
adding
it's-
other
yeah.
things. They'll say genetic code plus still developing, or
Yeah. Well. I think the other thing I was going to ask you about self-defense. Have you ever had like have you ever spoken about self-defense when it comes to like land or like sovereignty and shit?
like country versus country, or no? What do you mean?
Kind of like, okay, so I feel like there's like a really left-wing hypothetical you go with, or a right-wing. I think let's go with the right-wing one. Say like all the right-wingers about immigration are actually like correct. Just like say that there is like there's like a huge influx of people coming across the border, and the state that you're a part of is not enforcing it in any way.
Okay.
Would it be okay for you to just stand at the border with a gun and be like, here, buddy, turn around, or bang bang?
I don't know. That's a really hard one. Anytime, I think the most difficult moral questions are when you're starting to get conflicting systems. So like different governments fighting against each other, different states. Like I actually thought about this a lot. The more I think about it, like I don't know if I think like not sovereign cities, sanctuary cities. I don't know if that should be allowed. If states should be able, or like decriminalized marijuana. I don't know how I feel sometimes about states just standing in utter defiance of federal law if certain states are adversely affected more than others. So for instance, if people in like North Dakota or Vermont or Wyoming or Washington are all voting a certain way about immigration. But if the negative brunt of that immigration is being borne by like places like, you know, New Mexico, California, Arizona, Texas, you know, whatever. And then if they stand in like legal defiance of federal orders, right, by being sanctuary cities and not cooperating with federal officials for immigration stuff, I don't even know. I don't know how I would even begin to parse that question. Like, I don't know what I would say. Yeah, so, I don't know. Yeah, to go ahead, give me some thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know a way around that, because like I'm tempted to say like it's not worth it. Like, but assuming there's nothing, there's like no processing system for asylum, there's no border guards and everything, then it might be like, okay, yeah, fuck, I don't know. And the reason I like find it uncomfortable like answering a question like that is because if you go the left-wing way, left-wingers are very in favor of violence against like settler colonialism, right? Like whether you're talking about like all the history of like France and Algeria or South Africa in the past, or fucking like Haiti as well, I think. Like I think people tend to say it's quite justified to kill settlers, right? If they like under certain circumstances. Yeah, I think since people in your fucking chat are saying as well, yeah, you can say the same thing with West Bank, right? Because like there are some settlers who go into the West Bank and they just set up a fucking tent and say, this is ours now, we're going to claim it for like religious reasons. And I would wonder, like, is it okay for like a militia person to just stand there with a gun and say like, no, you need to turn around or we'll kill you?
Individuals enforcing like a state law, I think that's a little bit weird. Like, I don't know if individuals should be in the business of doing that. What do you think about like citizen arrests and stuff?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I know because when it comes to defending property with lethal force and things like that, you're kind of enforcing a law there as well, right? Just in a much more disproportionate way as well, because you can't just arrest them and take them to jail. Like you might even have to
I feel like
further.
Crimes against citizens are a bit different, like trying to keep somebody from stealing something versus like trying to pull somebody over for speeding, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just like that's the thing I've been trying to wrestle with for the last little while. When it comes to settlers, like it's especially like because that's not even enforcing a state law, it's enforcing international law. Like the settlements are like doing that is illegal under international law. But yeah, I don't know. Assuming they're not actually doing anything, right? Like, because a lot of settlers are also just very violent, like in any part of the world. Like when people do that, even like with Russia and Crimea, is like usually when settlers come in, it's very common for them to assemble into like groups and like attack the locals and shit like that. Sure. In which case it's a lot more clear. But if they're just going there, setting up and just not moving, it's like
the problem though, and again, all of it gets so complicated. The problem with that though is that once you get people in land that start to have claims to that land, then you also like political issues will always follow, right? Like that's the whole reason why like Modi in India wanted to start legalizing the building of houses in Kashmir. It's why in Jerusalem, what was that neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah or whatever?
Sheikh Jarrah.
Yeah, why people were fighting over who had rights to that property, because as soon as you start settling people in an area, your claims to that land become very fucking strong. That's why people fight so much over settlements in the West, but you know this, right? Yeah, but it's because as soon as you start getting people in an area, like it's funny because people say like squatters' rights, like I think internationally to some extent they're recognized. If you get a whole group of people living in an area and they start their families start to grow, now you're gonna start to have like national, international claims and everything relating to the land and who's allowed to be there. So yeah, even if it's just like a personal thing or like a state thing, eventually it will become like an international thing too, you know?
Yeah, because like that's the problem is depending where you are, you're like if you're in a place that is having like sovereignty violated, like if you're in the West Bank and settlers come in, it's like it's not just that they're, you know, quote unquote taking your land, it's also that they're like undermining the options of like you getting sovereignty ever, right? Like and that's where it gets, and I think with Crimea that's been a big problem as well. Like ever since the Tatar population returned, they have like constantly struggled for any kind of like resettlement or restitution because like it was all, so much of the land in Crimea, which is like their biggest asset, is controlled by a lot of Russian investors, and it's all like done under the counter, and there's not even like one single effective land register. So that what a lot of Tatars have had to do is just like to squat, and sometimes they get away with it, and other times they end up fighting with like local Russians and shit. Yeah.
No.
But then it's also like from their perspective, like what's like morally okay for them to do? Is it morally okay for like an ethnically cleansed population to return and squat on land that used to be theirs, and then use violence to defend the land they're squatting on? Or
Yeah, I don't have any good answers because people sometimes come on and try to ask questions about this. Where I don't have any good answers when it comes to resolving disputes between two entirely different systems. Like it seems because if you can't appeal to one like system of law and then you've got conflicting systems of law, at that point you're almost like just in a like whoever's got the bigger army, I guess, is the one that gets to do what they want. Because how do you choose otherwise?
So you wouldn't be able to have a position on like which ones are morally in the right or wrong, like whether the squatters who are using violence to defend their squats or the fucking business owners or property owners who want to defend it the same way.
I mean, like Israel Palestine. I think that's part of the problem there, right? Is that both groups feel like they have decent claim to the land. Jewish people have really strong reasons why they want to have at least one place where they can go without being murdered by everybody. Palestinians seem to have some decent claims for historical ties to certain communities, but like you're not appealing to a common like system of law. Like if it was just like one country called Israel, then you can argue that, okay, you're part of a state, the state makes decisions, you have to blah, blah, blah. But like when you start having competing systems, you can't appeal to, you can't appeal to just like one rule, that's, so I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, Israel-Palestine's a bit harder because like you would be appealing to international law. You would say international law is like it's pre-67 is Palestine and then the rest is fucking Israel. But if you're talking about Crimea, I think it might be a bit easier to, maybe not legally, but ethically, because I guess legally the Russians like own the land, right? And then ethically,
quick, I was gonna say even for international law though, like you only appeal to international law for as long as the international law agrees with you, right? Right, like it's depending on the size and strength of your country and who's supporting you, like the United States, right? Like people, I got this email a lot, or I get this question on. Somebody actually emailed this finally. Whenever people are always like, when is the United States going to be held, to call for their war crimes? Where's the trial for George Bush? And it's like, well, the answer is never, because there is no court or tribunal that's going to prosecute a U.S. president. It's just not going to happen. There's no international law. Like the United States would just withdraw from that body, Yeah, so it's just, I don't know. Fuck, I don't have good answers here for anything. Find somebody that does poli-sci. Good luck.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. What else was I going to talk about? Fuck, there was something. You said something that was going to prompt me to say something. I can't fucking remember what it was. Oh, well. Do you see when you... someone in your chat mentioned this. You see when you had your big fucking lefty arc like a few years ago with the whole like arguing with sort of like the hardline communists and tankies and shit.
Yeah.
Did that like just I feel like you've mentioned this before where you found that you basically had like a bunch of communists in your audience and then they all just kind of got purged and left, right?
Yeah, I gave them to
more or less what happened.
Gave them to my good friends Hassan and
Vosh.
Vosh, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've spent the last year maybe getting a bit roped up into those like discussions of just like small debates on my stream channel, and I feel like most of them are gone now, which is cool. Like the Discord's a lot nicer and shit. But like, I think I don't really know if there's been much of a payoff for it.
No, it's hard right now. The predominant culture is kind of like far left shit, and it's infected everything. Even the hip hop subreddits. I was watching. I think it was Killer Mike, that recent album that he made. We had a couple songs relating, like basically kind of like, I'll say broadly speaking, like self-empowerment, and like all of these threads, or maybe I shouldn't say all these communities, maybe it's like just quote unquote Reddit as a whole, like all these threads popping up about how horrible it was, that he was like ignoring systemic racism and that the album was like very tasteless. And then you get these reviewers like Anthony Fantano who are also like all ideologically captured by the far left, and it's just like, like that whole like leftist ultra socialist shit has like affected so much of the society, at least that I engage with online. So what I see on Twitter and Reddit, maybe in other parts is not as bad, but yeah, you're not going to find a big payoff right now for it. It'll probably swing back eventually. I mean, everything does, but yeah, right now the big bucks are definitely doing like the big lefty suck off, kill billionaires, kill landlords, that kind of shit. It's been like that for a couple of years now. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it puts me in a kind of strange place because I know when I started my channel, like for some, I guess just because I don't even know if I ever said anything that explicit, just because the rhetoric was like left leaning, and because I mentioned Marx a few times, and I did the breadtube format, was like just the audience just got fucking rammed with like USSR sympathizing like shares, and I'm like, what the fuck do you guys come from? And yeah, it's been really weird, like kind of figuring out. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we just need to find like different audiences.
Something. Yeah, it's hard out here. There's like there's no just like kind of like bog standard, like I don't know if you call it like neoliberal or whatever, like left leaning, not progressive. That audience like doesn't exist right now. You're either yeah, go ahead.
Wait, sorry, I don't. What does neoliberal mean anymore? Because fuck, when I was a teenager, like or even 20s, like as far as I remember, neoliberal meant like you support fucking Thatcher and Reagan and shock therapy and like anti-social democrat and dismantling safety nets and all that shit. Like, is that still what neoliberal means, or has it completely changed? Because now I feel like neoliberal is just everyone to the right of fucking Stalin. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Online, neoliberal seems to be online. On Reddit, neoliberal is like progressive that isn't like insanely like isn't a socialist. That's what it feels like it is on Reddit. Like neoliberals seem to be relatively progressive, like pro LGBT rights, pro even like forms of like big government safety nets and everything. They just don't want to be like socialists. So, but I don't know. But I've also heard, what you said, like neoliberals are also like fucking the devils, like one step from fascism or whatever. So it's I don't know.
Yeah, it's just that like kind of catch-all term. That's like if you can't really engage with someone's argument, just call them a neoliberal. Yeah. But it's the same thing with like, because I think as far as where I stand, like I still feel like I don't really know how much my positions have changed in the last few years, maybe on like a few niche things, but like even as like a democratic socialist, like basically which is the most boring one, right? Like I don't really know what a post-capitalist world looks like, but I do like the idea of experimenting with new things like co-ops or right of first refusal and fucking the Italian Marcora laws or whatever. But yeah, even that is just like, it's weird feeling that like a lot of people from my like original audience just find that too right wing as well.
Yeah. It's this is why I just like to talk about policies. I don't like to be like right or left or any of that bullshit. Like find policies, do policy debate, and I think that's more interesting than figuring out,
Yeah, that's kind of the direction I'm maybe going to go in forward. Like I always found as far as convincing people as well, like jargon just always made things worse.
Yeah.
And especially online. So like I avoided it mostly in the past, and now I just avoid it even more. But I was trying to do I think the next video I'm going to do probably after I finish this call is on the kind of like the way that the red pill is kind of collapsing in itself a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like the people who have done it more so than anyone else has not been leftists telling you to read fucking bell hooks or whatever. It's been like, I feel like it's been tradcons who have been like spearheading just looking at the videos and how many views they get and shit. I feel like you've mentioned that before as well, right? Like the tradcons seem to be mounting the big fucking counterattack against.
I think it's more just
people like you as well.
I think the movement got really big, really fast. I think there is a lot of ideological division within like conservatives and tradcons, or I'm sorry, red pillars and tradcons. But I think that like the red pill movement just kind of like took on this like really weird bend that's going to necessarily alienate other parts of the conservative base. So like the fresh and fit style of like, and even kind of pushed by the interstate, there's like these like the one-sided open relationships and the pursuance of like tons of sex, while also trying to flirt with like spirituality and Christianity, while also abandoning that now for Islam, while also like trying to do self-improvement. Like it's just so much shit that like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that have issues with it. Yeah.
I have this really weird idea about how like worldview and ideology is basically, for some people, it is just the same as scrolling through a feed and just picking and choosing like random things, like it's just, there's no consistency and there's no like solid value or anything. It's just, oh, this looks fun. This shiny thing looks fun for like a week. Okay, bored. Next thing. Yeah. But yeah, the thing I'm kind of interested in now is how I think a lot of the criticisms that tradcon types make of red pill are like quite good, although I don't really agree with the thing that they're pushing themselves. Do you know a YouTuber called Hamza?
Oh God, yeah.
Okay, what were your thoughts on him?
Everything I've seen from him is just the cringiest, most hollow, worthless shit in the world. There's something that's very frustrating. It's difficult for me to fight against. There is, once you've hit a certain level of self-confidence, it's very easy to see people that fake it. But when you don't have that level of self-confidence, it is impossible. So it's very frustrating trying to convince like a world full of people that have esteem issues that some people are charlatans or not. When you were there, it's very obvious that like the way that they try to sell confidence and the way they try to sell lifestyles, people's like, this ain't it. It's not going to make you happy. They probably don't even feel this way. But to a bunch of people that don't know otherwise, a lot of the things these people say are like super appealing, but nobody's like hitting like enlightenment or developing themselves in a really positive way in the long term by any of these people. But it's just so hard to communicate that to people, and I usually just don't care. I'm not gonna sit here and try to like sell my life. Well, I guess in a way I kind of do now when I'm fighting with these people, but yeah, I hate that guy. Everything I've seen is just like cringe as fuck.
Okay, I'm gonna be like a slight apologist, even though I kind of don't like him either. The thing I noticed with him is that I think he's a bit different from like red pill types in the sense that the advice he gives is like sometimes coherent and like sometimes hit and miss. So I saw this video about like, it's just called don't be a nice guy, right? And for him, like basically a nice guy was just someone who basically degrades women in the opposite way, is they think women are just these kind of people who all you need to do is agree with everything they say, put them on a pedestal, compliment the fuck out of them, and then that's how they'll fuck you instead, or just be their friend for a really long time, right? And I thought like that's like kind of insightful. That's like a very interesting way to put it, in that like that you're degrading women by putting them on a pedestal, and it's like its own kind of misogyny. But then he'll just go into this complete fucking segue about how if you don't stop competing for 1 second, your woman is going to be eyeing up other men, and your woman's going to fuck another man if you fall behind it. Then he just kind of loses me. But I think like even his criticisms of the red pill as well, like he talks about how he's been like he talks openly about how he goes to therapy and shit, and how when he's at therapy he like learns about trauma, and all the red pillers are traumatized and shit. And how like, oh, they hate women, but they're obsessed with women. I'm like, yeah, so yeah, it's funny seeing that like, I guess they may be better at speaking to the audience who are already in the red pill, and like they speak that language, and then but it's just kind of like pulling people out of a fucking like shithole and then bringing them into like a slightly less shithole. But then I don't know where that goes next. I feel like it's still the case that progressive types haven't really don't really know a way to grab that in the same way.
Well, I mean, yeah, because progressives suck at talking to majority classes, but yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Do you feel
it might be? I've seen some videos of Hamza guy that are really bad. I've seen other videos of him that aren't that bad at all. So it probably just depends on what we've seen. Like I'm sure there are some videos where it's like, oh, it's okay, yeah. But
yeah, there's like a bit where he talks about how he was feeling like really insecure in himself at the gym, and it made him like take it out on other people, and how he like had to stop himself from body shaming a fat guy in the gym in his mind. And I'm like, it's kind of adorable, but yeah, it's still just like it's just a shame that like for most of these red pill people who get sick of it, it's like that's where they're gonna go next, right? And there's like
hopefully to the little bit less worse place.
Yeah. I feel like as far as tradcon, I don't really like tradcons, but as far as the relationship style goes, like the whole traditional wife and husband thing, I feel like as long as it's consensual, I don't know why progressives are so against it, because isn't it kind of just like its own kind of dom-sub relationship?
Well, as long as it's consensual, it's okay. The only issue with tradcon relationships is the heavy social enforcement they used to have in getting people to do those styles of relationship. That used to be the issue. Yeah. So like if you let people do what they want to go to like a traditional relationship, that's totally fine. There shouldn't be any problem there. But the issue is when people like hardcore socially relegate women to those roles,
Yeah, I guess that's the difference now, is because like tradcons of today are very like, those relationships are the ones that you see on TikTok and shit. Is that it's women who can be somewhere else, and they could easily be somewhere else. They just don't want to.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And same with the guys. Yeah. Are you still? Do you feel like that's still going to take up a good bit of your content for the next wee while? The red pill stuff.
No, I feel like it's kind of dying down.
What do you think's coming next, or is there anything coming next?
Well, we're about to enter our next political season, so right.
Well, already you've got elections. Or
that's what I mean,
does that mean?
Right? The political season of like elections is coming up, so that's probably going to be.
Wait, when's the next presidential election? Is it 24? Or this winter, or what?
And at 1.5 years. Never mind. We're actually quite a ways away. What did I think it was this year? Yeah, because it's 2023. Oh, who knows? I guess we're going to need one arc between now and the next election season, so.
Yeah, I think I still have money on somehow, I don't know. I somehow have money on DeSantis winning the primary and then Trump splitting the vote by going as an independent. But
could happen, yeah.
That was a brave bet, I think, at the time. I still feel like it might happen, though. In the same way that no one expected Trump to come to the top. It does feel like between now and the next year and a bit, like the diminishing return on Trump's fucking like appearances and shit like that, and DeSantis still being fairly new, apart from that he's like a charismatic void.
Wait,
I don't know.
Or go ahead.
I feel like the thing with Trump is that like people like him only get one chance, as far as I know, right? Because the system's horrible. We're gonna come in and radically change everything. Once you have any power and nothing changes, like everything that got you into power is gone, right? And now his like "Make America Great Again" used to be really like sort of opaque and like almost like mysterious to people, and that they could just kind of fill in the blanks with whatever they want. But now "Make America Great Again" is, oh yeah, in 2019 we had the greatest economy, we had the greatest president, we had like the greatest foreign policy. Like it doesn't really work, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I agree. This is like, it's like the populist gambit, where you get one shot and then people realize, oh wait, populism actually is dog shit because they can't do anything or deliver on any of their promises, and then you go back to normal. Yeah.
You know what? I didn't know this until a bit recently, but it happened to the Nazis as well a little bit. There were two elections in 1932, one in the summer, one in the winter, but in that 6-month space, they lost like 2 million votes because they had been the largest party. Nothing really like that they promised came into fruition, and like the depression was still going on, a few other things, and that was actually like the last free election that they had. And then between 32 and the end of 32 and the beginning of 33, they had to depend on like, you know, like the Reichstag fire and the fact that it was very easy at that point to just rule by decree. So
yeah, I mean, like, systems are very complicated and very tenacious. There's a reason why they are the way they are. It's very, like, sexy, and a lot of people think that, like, oh my God, like, all the political systems are so corrupt, it's just lobbying, and I'm just gonna change this one thing and fix it. That's like an attractive thought. It feels good to think that. But the reality is anytime you start integrating or interacting and engaging with these systems, you start to realize that, like, oh, fuck, okay, this is probably set up for a reason. It's probably not just because everybody's corrupt and evil. This is actually a lot harder to change than I thought. Like, I think typically that's usually what happens. And then the excuses roll in for why, you know, it was the deep state and Trump couldn't do it because of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, nah, it's probably because everything you said was bullshit. And now you're starting to realize it, yeah. But that's not very satisfying, so.
Gotcha. Anything else?
You kill yourself. That's what.
Okay, bye-bye. Subscribe to my channel, DGG. Fuck you. All right, bye-bye. Take care.
Love you.